muito obrigado a todos aqueles que estão a assistir a este vídeo. Obrigado também por acompanharem os demais vídeos. Mais um mês, mais um vídeo, desta feita com um tema diferente e muito importante ser abordado, tratado. E tenho comigo uma amiga especial. O seu testemunho de vida vai ser encorajador, estou seguro, para todos nós. E quero nestes breves minutos falar com ela sobre o tema do abuso. Especificamente, que tipo de abuso vamos falar, Anika? Eu quero que contes a tua experiência de vida. Que tipo de abuso tu sofreste? Quando sofreste? E onde sofreste?
Eu vou falar em inglês para... The first time that I was abused, I was 6, and it was by a family member. It was in our home, and it was him experimenting on my body in areas that were not to be touched, which we can talk about that later. Specifically in my private areas, he was very forceful in wanting to touch everything. So that was the first time that I was abused when I was 6.
Okay. Só uma vez ou?
Yes, with him it was one time.
Okay. Houve outras vezes?
It was just one time with him over like one night of abuse, yeah.
Okay. Na tua experiência, horrível experiência, e nas marcas que tens carregado dessa mesma experiência, como é que achas que podemos, um cristão, um pastor, um conselheiro bíblico, qualquer pessoa também, como é que pode ajudar uma pessoa que passou por abuso sexual?
In this situation specifically, I think in preventing things like that to happen, I think it's very important specifically for parents as they're teaching their young children to use names of body parts. Like, I have a vagina, you have a penis. We do not touch these areas. I have breasts, we don't touch those. I think a lot of times, at least from what I understand, there is a lot of people that use pet names like, oh, this is a little, whatever we use. No, it's a vagina and a penis, and we don't touch those things. That's very important, because a lot of times if a child is telling a story about something that maybe happened, it's not as serious. But if a child says, somebody touched my vagina, okay, we talk about that because nobody touches my vagina. Somebody touched this area. No, we don't do that. So I think one thing that I've learned is that it's very important to teach children what our anatomy is. Name it. There's no shame in our anatomy. We have anatomy. For me, in my experience, I think that if I had the freedom to be able to say my own anatomy, I probably would have said something, but I didn't. So the first thing, specifically for parents, would be just teach anatomy. What is your anatomy? Things that we don't touch, things that we do touch, good touch, bad touch, and also creating an environment of safety, that we listen to our children when they tell us things. That's really, really important. I think that would have really changed. I didn't tell my mom until I was 14 or 15. And I think if I had maybe felt more safe to tell my mom, I think I probably would have told my mom. But I didn't. Not that my parents were bad parents. It was just something that we just didn't talk about. So yeah, I would say naming anatomy and creating a safe space and always listening to our children and asking questions. One thing that I have found is that, I don't know why, but there is shame attached to anything specifically to like my parents' generation. And so they don't say anything. Or we don't talk about sex until you're 16. No, you actually need to be talking about sex when your kids are like 8 years old and younger. Because we have the iPhone, we have the internet, people are going to school, and if anybody's going to be introduced to pornography or abuse, you want to be, as a parent, the first one to introduce them to that. You want to open up the conversation. So I think a huge thing for parents is it's not shameful. Sex is a God-given gift within marriage that God himself created, and we need to talk about it. So I think opening a safe space to talk about it and then naming the anatomy is a huge place to start for helping prevent abuse. Within the church, I experienced another form of abuse when I was older. It was a girl within my church that over a course of 3 years abused me multiple times. Her abuse did not happen in the church, it happened in her home. She was from my church. I don't remember my church talking about anything sex related as a kid. It could be my memory is wrong, but to my knowledge, we did not talk about in the church, like the pastor, the leaders, nobody. Again, I think the same principle of parents also applies in the church, that we need to talk about sex in a good light, because it's a beautiful gift that God has given within marriage. It's not a bad thing. So let's talk about the goodness of what that is and why God has created and why that's so beautiful. Because when we talk about how beautiful it is, I think it paints a picture that when somebody experiences it wrong, they say, what they're talking about in church and what I experience are two different things. So let's ask questions about it. And also as leadership in church, as pastors or deacons or elders, the same thing of we need to create spaces that are safe for people to ask questions and not be ashamed, because sex is not shameful. And practically in the church, always having accountability. Pastors having accountability, leaders having accountability, Sunday school teachers having accountability. If you're going to teach a class, don't be the only teacher. Have a window in the door, have the door open. It takes one time. And man, having open accountability, safe spaces, and leaving no room for anybody to ask or even doubt, I wonder what happened in that classroom. No, we don't do that. We are always above reproach, always. I think those things are very, very helpful.
Muito bom. Excelentes conselhos, Anika. Muito obrigado por partilhares connosco os teus conselhos também, a tua experiência horrível, trágica, mas como Deus também transformou em algo maravilhoso. Agora, para poder estar a abençoar-nos a todos nós, àqueles que estão a assistir, obrigado por assistirem, compartilhem o vídeo também para poder ajudar outros, para poder também desafiar-nos, especialmente nós como cristãos, no contexto da igreja local, a prevenir abusos sexuais, a poder denunciar abusos sexuais e também acompanhar com amor, com graça, aqueles que têm sofrido de abusos sexuais. Isso tudo num ambiente, tal como foi referido, de amor, graça, honestidade, sinceridade, transparência. Essa é a chamada do Senhor para as nossas vidas. Que Deus vos abençoe e até o próximo